Hey guys, Deathletter Magic here, and oh boy, somebody successfully copyrighted a Magic the Gathering deck. And I can see why it got approved, but spoiler alert, we're 13 seconds in the video and I'm going to tell you my conclusion. It shouldn't have been. I can see why it appears on the surface that it should have been approved, but it shouldn't have been. It is still pretty gray area. I'm not saying like this is absolutely how the law works, but I'll support it in this video. So pretty long video, but that's because I go back and forth and give, the pros and the cons, like here's why it should be protected by copyright, but here's why it shouldn't be. And here's like an example from history, and here's like an equivalent example where somebody sued somebody and won or lost. How does fair use come in? And theoretically, if this all fully held up and they double down on, no, we're going to let people copyright Magic decks, what does that mean for you? Can you play it? Can you show it? Can you play it in your own house? Can you play it for money at a tournament? I cover all that in this video. But if you're not interested in watching the whole video and a bunch of legal examples, and that sounds boring to you, even though a ton of people are into it, me included, the final conclusion is basically like, I can see why they would think it's an assembly, because it really comes down to, and a lot of other people pointed this out, is it a recipe? Is it just, here's a list, and that's all it is? Because, factual items like lists, recipes without anything added to it, instructions, anything that like non-creative and cold and factual, you can't copyright. So you might be saying, oh, well, a deck list. Of course you can't copyright that. It's a damn deck list. It's a list of objects. Like, what? But then other people are saying, of course a deck compilation, you build a deck that's a creative work. Look at all the, the intention, the style, just everything that goes into it. Let's just kind of feel out, if you built a deck, is it a creative work? Everybody would say yes. So you've got, is it a creative work as a whole versus is it just a list of objects? It's both. So the way that the courts leaned was, we're going to grant you a copyright, sure. Because they thought it leaned towards like, oh, somebody sold me bricks and I built a giant monkey statue out of it. Does the maker of the bricks have any claim to what I built with it? No. Is mine a completely new work? Can I copyright it? Can I take pictures of it and copyright the pictures of it? Absolutely. It's the whole raw material versus artistic assembly. And of course, it's a sculpture. I made art, duh. So a lot of people are leaning that way, but I'm going to show you through multiple examples why, like, yes, it leans towards it. Yes, it leans away from it. But in the end, there is an overriding, like, really two major points that say that this should be invalidated or it never should have been granted in the first place, and no deck should ever be approved. With an exception. Actually, there are two exceptions that I state at the end of the video about what types of decks would logically and should morally be able to be copyrighted, but the reasons for them you are going to be surprised by. I'll give you one of them. I do want people to watch till the end, but for you who really don't care about legal crap, first of all, why'd you click on the video? But anyway, it's if you physically took the cards and built a thing out of them, like a sculpture or a work of art. But the other one is much more interesting, but it only makes sense if you watch the rest of the video. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So first up, we're going to start with the basics. Let's just talk about what you can and can't copyright. You can pretty much copyright any creative work or creation unless it's on the exempted list, so I'm really just going to cover what you can't copyright. Any kind of like an idea, a methodology, a system, a way of doing things, a business operation, something kind of intangible like that, it's just exempt. I don't really have any reasoning why, that just they don't copyright it. It's just that simple. Mathematical principles, formulae, and that kind of rolls into like facts. Anything that is a fact cannot be copyrighted. It's how it's presented, but I'll get into that after the exemption list. So a process, a method, anything like that, you're looking more at like a patent, like our patented method of, packaging this and mixing this and doing this and, assembling an Oreo, or like our patented technique for baking Twinkies. Then you're looking at patent law. Patents and trademarks are their own thing, and I'm not going to get way into them in this video. But copyright, you can't copyright anything that even resembles that. Excessively commonly known information, which kind of rolls into facts. So we're talking like calendars, stuff that's like generally agreed to be a thing. Like just the calendar, not like, oh, I also put, these graphics and a bunch of puppies on it. It's just the calendar, like time itself and the way we measure it cannot be copyrighted. Like unit conversions, height and weight charts, telephone numbers, those are, it's kind of tied into facts. Like just the fact that 1 inch is this much, and that like you can't copyright a ruler. Anything that's a public document right off the bat, that's out. This one came up in Fortnite, any kind of choreographic work, pretty much. That's a little more gray area, but let's just say the people suing Fortnite lost. Now, an entire play, that choreography, my understanding is that it can be copyrighted, but just like a dance move can't. So I don't know. What I'm reading says any choreography. That hasn't been my experience. Just know that that's kind of gray area too. For copyright reasons, I'm using multiple websites and multiple lists to look this up, and I actually don't agree with the next one, so I'm not going to say it. I think they're actually wrong. Names, titles, short phrases, expressions, common sayings, all of those. Nope. Business names. Nope. I mean, that's trademark, but you can't copyright a business name. That may come as a surprise to a lot of you, actually. Even like nicknames, they can't be. And anything just excessively short. It has to be long enough that it's considered a creation and not like a commonly known or said thing. Pretty much anything to do with fashion design, that's all exempt. There are mountains of exceptions, but okay. And that's about it. But the ones I wanted to point out that are most relevant is, let's say, Legos as a company has some kind of copyright, mostly trademarks, mostly patents, but I don't know, they got some kind of copyright on something. I don't know what it would be. They have no rights to what I build with the Legos unless I'm building exactly what was on the box or following a guide. Then they might have a claim to it, but they're generally not going to be dicks about it. I mean, maybe I might try to sell it and they wouldn't even care. I bought the kit, whatever. If somebody sells me paints and then I paint a painting with it, they have absolutely no claim to the painting I made with it. It's like the raw materials versus creation thing. Whatever you create with a thing, a building supply, just anything you can assemble or make anything with, the makers of the raw materials have absolutely zero claim to it unless they made it first and you're copying them. And still, to me, that seems like more of a patent, but it could almost be either or both. I mean, if I bought a bunch of paver bricks and made exactly the design for my back patio that I saw in a magazine made by the people who made the bricks, well, we might have an issue there. Other than that, whatever I build out of it, no matter how beautiful or what I do with it, they have no claim to it whatsoever because I created it using their materials. Now are we starting to sound familiar when it comes to a card game like Magic the Gathering? Wizards of the Coast has absolutely no copyright control or claim, nor can they prevent a copyright of me assembling my own thing using their tools and their materials. Now their materials go together in a game that they probably have multiple patents on. I know they have multiple trademarks, but trademarks almost don't even apply to this entire discussion, so we'll just forget about that. But they're giving us tools to build things, and there's near infinite combinations of the things that we can put together with it, but it's for the purposes of a game, and they probably have, like I said, multiple patents about, like, I could look them up, but, maybe like mana, the turb mana, how mana works, how lands work, having a 60 card deck. I mean, I don't know. A lot of those are kind of gray area and kind of general too, but the patent office is even worse than the copyright office, to be perfectly honest. So what somebody did in this case is they got registration number TXUT, whatever, it's all certified, yeehaw, June 22nd, 2021. The title of the work is Angels and Demons, Year of Completion 2021, and it's their deck list with Wrath of God, Unholy Strength, Baneslayer Angels, and Angel, and a couple others. So on the surface, to me, it sounds absolutely like they're perfectly in their rights to do so. I mean, obviously, morally, completely outside the law, are they in the right to do this? No, absolutely not. Did they do it because they're like, no, nobody's copying my idea? From what I heard, no. A lot of people took the, wow, this is taking anti-net decking to the extreme angle in their coverage of this. That's kind of funny. But from a legal standpoint, should this have been granted? And what does it mean? Does it mean nobody else can play with the deck but them? This is where we're reaching the end of my knowledge. And you'd almost get, like, if you asked 10 different lawyers, you wouldn't get 10 of the same answer. So it's not just me, it's very like, what the heck? So I wish I could cite precedent on this, but it's never came up in any of the cases that I've followed. Would I be able to take a copyrighted deck and build it and then play it with my friends in my own private residence? Not a tournament, not making money, not selling it. Absolutely. If I took this deck, assembled it, and sold it on eBay, would I be looking at trouble because of the copyright? Most likely. So those are the two extremes where it's like absolutely no and absolutely yes. Now, if I built the deck and took it to a tournament and prize money was on the line, that's where I'm not sure. You're using something in a commercial sense. So I can violate any kind of copyright for personal use as long as it's not commercial use, and as long as it isn't like replicated. I think more than one copy, and like there's all these other weird exemptions, but it's almost exclusively covering like DVDs. But that's another thing that was part of a slightly different specific variation of copyright law, where it's like, am I allowed to make a backup of my digital media? And that was a yes, but this isn't digital media, these are paper cards, and the thing they're copywriting is not a digital creation, it's a list, it is like a thing. But then remember, recipes are not copyrightable. And that's where we get to like, should this even have been granted in the first place? Because we get absolutely yes, because Wizards is providing the building blocks. Somebody created something brand new out of it that's never been seen before, no precedent. So should they get a copyright? Yes. If you build something out of Legos, like you build, I don't know, a panda and then take a picture of it, that's your panda. Nobody else can use the picture of it. Nobody else can like build the exact replica of it or, sell it. But could they build it and put it in their own house? Yes, because that's personal use. That's my understanding of it. So hopefully that ties back together like everything I said with the Legos example. But as far as recipes goes, it's kind of all falls under you can't copyright facts. You can't copyright just cold information because it's not a creative work. Now I know, does every copyright have to be a creative work? Not necessarily, but generally yes. Now if I spent 2 years creating the perfect recipe, I created a brand new thing that's never been seen in the culinary world ever before, would I consider that a work, like a creative work of fine arts? Absolutely. Absolutely 100%. Can I copyright it? No. Now, can Nabisco or whatever go copyright the exact method that they created for cooking a cookie in a certain amount of time or like a certain conveyor belt style or something? If it's complex enough, yes. And if they created it and if it's different from anything that would be considered prior art, yes. But that's a patent. Copyright? Not really. So, I mean, when I say facts, people can get all wacky with this. Like, any kind of musical composition that's, like, more than, like, 2 notes or something, or just, like, a sequence of notes. See also the ridiculous Katy Perry lawsuit. Hell yeah, her DJ stole it. But on appeal, it didn't stand up in court, so that's crap. There's a reason Flame won the first time, okay? Let's just say it was that close. But anyway, besides short musical sequences, anything fairly long can be copyrighted. But then you might say, oh, but Des, factually, these are the notes that you play to create the song. That's a fact. The notes are a fact. There's no gray area or creativity there. It is a fact that these notes will equal the song. Yeah, but the song is copyrighted. So you can't go into court and say notes are facts, okay? You're not going to get very far. That one's very, very, very well established. So when it comes to recipes, though, you might be able to patent the recipe itself or the final product. I'm not 100% sure. That's still, like I said, kind of gray area. You can patent a methodology or a manufacturing process, but would just general cooking be considered that? My guess would be no. It just comes down to complexity and whether they, in their opinion, think that you actually created something that's different enough than anything anybody has done before. Like if I take 2 beef steaks and then use them as the buns and then cook a lamb roast and put it in the middle and call it the mega meat sandwich, but I cook it with cooking oil in a frying pan, I don't think I'm going to win a patent for that. Or a copyright. That's like, oh wow, you cooked a thing and assembled it slightly differently. Wow, nobody's ever put meat in a pan and made it warm. But if I cook it with dynamite, or I use that as like a meat tenderizer and then cook it on top of lava, okay, I might be able to get a patent for that. But like if I invent a giant commercial stainless steel machine that can cook a bagel in 30 seconds with a rather unique novel method that's never been seen before in all of industry, yeah, I probably will get a patent for that. But the actual recipe itself, absolutely not. So that's kind of where the line is drawn and what is in what category, just to make more sense here. So if you've ever been to a recipes website, you'll notice that every modern one has a bunch of fluff. Like, oh, my grandma used to bake this on the farm. Usually it's not even true, by the way, from what I heard. But they could throw in, like, historical stuff, because historical facts cannot be copyrighted either. But the exact way that you presented it, like creative writing and your account of it, and, like, how it all comes together into a point that you're making, let's just say if somebody was going to rip that off, they better really change it quite a bit, change the order, change the presentation of the facts, or just stick to the facts, and then make like a different point at the end in summary, because that's a little too close. So all the recipe database websites back like 10, 20 years ago were having all these problems with people just scraping with a bot every single recipe in their database and throwing it up on their own website. Because it takes, couple minutes and absolutely zero effort, and people are like, now I run a recipe website, and then they would just use SEO and ads to like stomp on the original. So they'd steal all their content and then bury them. Absolutely nothing legally stopping them from doing it, which is why they've done all this value added stuff like, oh, stylistically this goes great this time of year, and I think this this pairs well with the feelings of fall, and well, you'd want to throw in pumpkin spice because you'd make it in October, or, this is a traditional Thanksgiving thing, and then here's this historical reference, and here's like a story of my family making it 9 years ago, and then, well, I burnt it, but then I recovered it this way, and this is why the recipe ended up the way it was. And like all that whole narrative and the whole story and all that goes into the recipe and all the fluff surrounding it, that is copyrightable, but the recipe is not. So somebody would see that and be like, oh, the whole context and like what wine it pairs with and what, if it's good for breakfast or not, and if like people made it 100 years ago or if this is a more modern trend. They're all facts, but you start putting them together and you're like, oh, okay, this is actually like a creative writing thing. So they're not allowed to rip it off exactly verbatim when it hits a certain level of complexity, and the order and style that the facts are presented in is a thing that is copyrightable. So let's say you cut out all that fluff and you've got nothing but a whole bunch of recipes. If you assemble them into a recipe book and they're I'd say anything but alphabetical, but honestly, I think even alphabetical, that's covered. Nobody would be able to rip off your book word for word, page for page, because you presented the 100 recipes in this exact order because it made sense to you, and the order that something is presented in is copyrightable. See how this gets really, really complicated, but it's fascinating to me. I think it's very interesting. So wait a minute, even if the cards themselves, the artwork, and the deck aren't copyrightable, the order that you're putting them in might be? But then it's like, well, is it a recipe or is it a recipe book? I don't have an answer for you. It seems like it would be both when we're talking about the Magic the Gathering deck. If I was the judge, which, my God, would I not be qualified to do that, I would say it leans very heavily towards, no, you made a recipe. This is a recipe of how you build the deck. But the idea of the deck as a whole, how you play it, why it was built the way it was, and why it's exactly in the order that it's in, is important. But then also there's like shuffling, and also it's going to be in a different order every time you play it. So copywriting an order when there is no order and the order isn't important, that's another interesting thing. Like, could I just scramble the order of the cards and then present it and say, well, now I copyrighted it and it's the same exact deck list, just with all the cards in a different order? I'd actually lean towards yes, but the idea of the deck, what the deck does, the creation that the deck represents, would I kind of gray area, soft lean towards that's copyrighted. They actually created a thing with creativity and work. They have made an assembly that is a new thing. I'd say yes. So we've got hard fact recipe, it's just a list and they don't even own the damn cards anyway. Anything related to the cards, the card name, the card art are all creations of Wizards of the Coast and owned by them. Not to mention the trademark issues with their name on it, plus the card back being copyrighted and just all that, that's a mess. But remember, at the end of the day, if a brick company has a copyright on exactly how their brick appears, and then I build a wall out of it, they have no claim to the wall whatsoever. And I think that overrides almost anything. So it's like, can a deck period be copyrighted? And maybe. But well, can the deck as an object be copyrighted when it's full of nothing but copyrighted material? I'd almost say no. But remember those compilation CDs where it's like the now that's shitty music? Or whatever those dumb pop compilations are, they can copyright just the fact that they chose those songs and put them in that order. All the rest of his copyrighted works, now obviously they paid the licensing fee because it's a licensed thing and it's like you're selling somebody else's songs as songs, but the assembly itself can be copyrighted separately. Could an assembly in a distinct, like we picked out these songs for this reason, they go together for this reason, and they're all romantic, or they're all this, or they're all like absolute club banger songs, or like this is our deep bass compilation and this is the ones we chose for it. Yeah, I think you've created a thing, and that's well held up by copyright laws. Do you need cover art and a title for the album to qualify? My guess would be no, but it helps. So that's the closest example I could think of where, yeah, it's well supported by law that you can make an assembly of things that are otherwise copyrighted. Now, it's music, so you have to license it, that's separate. But the copyright itself, ignoring anything else, was granted just on the assembly of things that you took and put together, even if every single piece was separately copyrighted by someone else already. So I think, what do we have, like 2 votes for yes and 2 votes for no, all citing similar precedent for should this have been granted in the first place? Like I said, it just, all things considered, do I lean towards yes with an overriding, like, do I feel like, just gut check, feel like they made a thing? Yes, I've played the game long enough that I feel like I made a thing when I build a deck. And then you've got the highest level thing that I can think of, which is, the brick, the Legos, the paints, I made something out of your stuff, deal with it, I'm going to copyright it. So even though I found some counterexamples like recipes and other stuff where it's like, no, that just looks like a list, like, oh, it's a factual list with nothing else put into it. I think there are more reasons for it being granted than against it. So I would very slightly lean towards, yeah, I guess they were right in issuing this copyright. But then we get into the one thing that you guys are all wondering, which I touched on already. What the hell does this copyright mean? Can I not build the deck? Can I change it by one card? Is that significant enough? Let me just answer all of that at once. You'd have to go to court and find out. It is so not cut and dry where it's like, oh, I swapped one card out. Now, is it a different creation? Is it a similar enough? I mean, look at all like the Chinese ripoff companies. Oh, they changed the order of 2 words, but it's all the same words. Is that different enough? And actually, I mean, that's still more trademark. I was going to get into like hilarious, like generic cereals and store brand cereals and what they name them. And then I realized that that's 100% trademark. So let's jump back to what you can and can't do. Let's say you make a magazine or an online website or any kind of publication that you obviously want copyrighted in its entirety and maybe individually at the article level. And you want to feature this deck list. And you presented exactly how they copyrighted it. Oh, you're in trouble now. You will 100% be in violation of copyright. Now, fair use, like if you want to show it for educational purposes and the whole article is like, here's why we think that they built it this way, while we're educating you on like CMCs and how to play better and all that, that probably would be fair use, but then you get the 7 pillars of fair use, the most important of which is it a market replacement for the product? You literally showed the entire thing in its entirety with the full deck list. And 2, how much of it did you use? Well, all of it, so I don't know about that. It's just like how it's almost impossible to have a fair use of a song when you use the entire song. No matter how you're like, oh, look at the organizational structure of this and the notes and all that. Even if you interrupt the song every 15 seconds to talk about what happened in the last couple musical measures and talk about, well, this instrument, whatever. If you show it in its entirety, I don't know. But then like, well, would anybody listen to your 15-minute video of a 2-minute song instead of the song? No, because you broke it up into enough pieces. So it's like, there's all these like really fine little things. And also, fair use is a defense in court, not a magical right to not go into court in the first place. Unless it's like so blatantly, egregiously obvious that it's fair use. Like you used 1% of a movie to talk about like how they trained the animals in that one scene, and your entire video is about animal training in Hollywood. And then they're like, we're going to take you to court, DMCA takedown. You better get rid of it. You better pay up for a settlement or we're going to take you to court. If you tell them, oh my God, I use 1% of it. It is completely a new creation. I did not in any way replace your entire movie as a product. Would people watch my video instead of your movie? No, because I use 1% of it. And like, what's the purposes? Educational content involving animals, and yours is dramatic entertainment. We're not even in the same market. So if you tell them, hey, you are completely wrong and this is fair use, to such an amazingly obvious degree that if you go to court, it will immediately be kicked out of court and you'll owe us our legal fees. Like, that's where they should stop and they're in the wrong. Now, if you had, Ethan from H3H3 versus Matt Haas, where, yeah, he basically openly admitted, I'm suing you because I don't like what you said and I want it removed from the internet because wah mean words. Okay, that's a different take on it. But other than that, they showed like 85 or 90%, if I'm not mistaken, of his video in their video. Ooh, ouch. Would I, after watching theirs, want to go watch his video? No, I've already seen it in pretty much its entirety. Now, did they add a ton of commentary to it? And did they stop every couple minutes and say, wow, let's comment on what just happened there? Yeah, so commentary, okay. He was like children's entertainment. They were general entertainment. Like, it was just different enough that they won the lawsuit, but it was worth going to court over. It wasn't like a cut and dry, obvious as all hell, fair use all day, every day, where they could just tell him, hey, don't even go to court. It'll get thrown out instantly and you could pay our lawyer's fees. That was worth fighting out. And then they won in the end because it was really, really, really close. And they claim that that's not why they didn't seek legal fees, because you're only going to get legal fees granted if it was truly and sincerely egregious. Their grounds for going after legal fees would have been that he admitted his reason for the lawsuit. That's it. Our intention for filing the lawsuit is this. If you can prove that that's sincere and back it up with evidence other than just one statement, they will owe you legal fees because that is complete and utter misuse of the U.S. legal system. And that's all I'm going to talk about that case because it's the most famous, good example of fair use. And I hate everybody involved. Ethan's an asshole and the other guy's an asshole. So that's still a fair use thing. Can you fair use this copyrighted Magic deck? To go back to what I was initially saying, like if you're gonna break it down for educational purposes in the context of building a deck, but you still show it in its entirety, I would say no. You're still providing a market replacement. Now, if you wanted to focus in on 3 card interactions and nowhere in your article do you show the entire deck list, 100% you are going to win in court because it's educational, it's a review, you're making your own thing, you're making an educational video, not a deck list. Those are 2 completely different things, and nowhere did you show the entire deck. So would it be a market replacement for the guy selling the deck list or selling a publication that contains the deck list now that it's copyrighted? No, because you never showed the rest of it. You really do need it all to be there, otherwise it's not a deck. Now, if you go back to like music, I mean, if I just show the guitar solo and that's it, and then I review that, is that a market replacement or not? Well, it's the most important part of the song. If I just show the chorus, is that integral enough to the song to pretty much be a large enough portion of the song that it's a market replacement and it's fairly representative of the thing as a whole? Well, court cases would say yes. That's why nobody reviews music on YouTube, because you're going to lose every time. Remember the multiple YouTubers and Twitch streamers who were showing entire full episodes of anime, but they would kind of like pause it once in a while or talk over it and be like, here's my commentary on it? It's still a market replacement. You still just showed somebody the entire episode. You are not in fair use and you're going to lose. So like, I really wanted to show fair use because what would be a fair use of this deck? Not much. Legally, not much. So if people are going to be like, yeah, but fair use, fair use, fair use. I think you'd have, like, if you want to do something with this deck that just got copyrighted, the answer is never going to be show off the deck list and review it on a YouTube video or a website, because you're going to lose every time. Now, would the person even pursue legal action? Probably not. They just did this as like a funny troll to see if they could get away with it and to make a point. And I heard it was kind of more like a provocateur art piece is what it's kind of being presented as. They just did it to do it and to get people talking. And I don't think that they're actually trying to like, oh, now we're going to go after and sue everybody. Ooh, we're a copyright troll. But if you're going to base your copyright violation, your clear not fair use on, I don't think the person will sue me, cross my fingers, let's just say you'd be better off with a statement from them signed that says they're not going to sue you and that they're allowing you to use it, aka a granted license. So just to not paint the person in the wrong light, what we know, and I am basing this entirely on MTG Arena Zone's statement that they have assembled or gotten from him, is that Hovden, the guy who filed the copyright, has a long history, allegedly, of filing copyrights that are specifically intended to point out the flaws in the copyright system. So this is almost like a protest copyright. We've seen those before, like some game companies where they got an unbelievably simplistic copyright that never should have been approved. Or like the Fine Brothers going after the term React. Okay, now nobody can use the word React, a singular common language English word. You can no longer use that in the context of a YouTube video, really. I don't even remember if that one was granted or if they dropped it. I think they ended up dropping the application, but it looked like it was initially like going to get approved or something like that. I'm like, the word React, really? And like, you ever heard of the prior art of people using the term React before your channel even existed, especially on YouTube? Like, are you kidding me? I think people were just about to throw 1,000 protests up on the copyright for like prior art, and then the judge would have to take those all into consideration. I think that's how that works. And then like to just be like, no. So then they just pulled the app instead. The application, I should say. That's one that never should have been granted. But there are like companies out there who have like copyrighted insanely simplistic terms, and they said we're just using it as a defensive weapon to go after Chinese clones. Oh, that's great, it's all fine. No, you never should have been granted that in the first place. Too simplistic, way too simplistic. I wish I remembered some of the examples. I couldn't find any, but they were like, you could imagine how I think PUBG had one. Oh yeah, they tried to copyright the term Battle Royale. You ever heard of the movie Battle Royale that you have openly admitted that that's what you named your game after? The concept and term Battle Royale has been used so commonly and so prior to them coming up with it, no wonder they lost that copyright suit or pulled their application when they got heat. It was one of the two. And they said, well, we're just going to go after Chinese clones of our game. Oh, okay. Well, then go after the ones that are calling themselves PUBG or whatever. I mean, but the funny thing is they'll change one word and then that's like different enough because, you know, video game names are similar enough. So those are some like hilarious copyright things that never should have gone through, and how they were like handled, and how people were like no prior art, and how they shouldn't have been granted in the first place. How many of them apply to this? That's a really good question that I don't really have an answer for, but those are the similar considerations to take into your mind while you're thinking about this. I mean, prior art, it comes to how different. If somebody played this exact deck list before this person built it, 100% prior art, boom, copyright gets what do you call it, invalidated after the fact, which takes, like I said, years and a lot of lawyer dollars. Your time to show prior art was when the application was pending. Although I don't remember if copyrights have like a 90-day like complaint thing, or if that's only patents or like trademarks or something, or if it's all three. Like I said, hobbyist, not a lawyer. I just kind of follow the stuff as a hobby. I got my blind spots. But then, is swapping out one card good enough? My guess would be no. It's still pretty much the same strategy, pretty much the same creation. Well, then how many cards would change it? It just comes down to, oh, well, I changed 8 cards, and now, in my opinion, the deck has a different point, a different strategy, and a different way of winning. Let's go to court. Because it wouldn't be cut and dry. None of this would be cut and dry. Almost anything that even resembles this, or especially operates under the same name, but that would be like you would just lose in court. Like, let's say I drop 4 angels and add in 4 demons, and then instead of calling it Angels and Demons, which is the copyrighted title of the work, I call it Demons and Angels. Is it different enough? There is no clear yes or no. We'd have to fight it out in court. That simple. It just goes so into gray area that it's like, we'll have to let a jury or a court decide, and I guarantee if it was a jury, it would get hung. They would just be like, we don't know. This is too close. It's too close to call. We don't know or care, and both parties involved are idiots. You know why? Because copyrighting a deck list in a card game where you build stuff with, build decks out of cards is idiotic, petty, and stupid. But that's the point. Remember what I just said about the guy who filed the copyright. He's doing it to point out, like, wow, this is stupid. So I think if it didn't get approved, and if it got rejected, he would have been like, okay, there we go. Look at this. The copyright people did their job. But I think in the community's opinion and in his opinion, the Copyright Office mistaking this for an assembly, for like a creation, like I used their raw materials and made it into a new thing, it's loose enough that it shouldn't have been approved, but probably just some dumb lawyer or judge didn't know enough about card games or how they work or Magic the Gathering and the ins and outs and how people play it that they're just like, I don't know, looks like an assembly to me. Boom, approved. And as they stated on MTG Arena Zone in their wonderful article, he has a history of filing copyrights that in his opinion shouldn't have been approved in order to raise attention for and point out the weaknesses in the copyright system, and there are a lot of them. So, I mean, he's out there doing good work. So do I think he shouldn't have done it? Considering the context and why he did it, no, I think he should have done it. I support what he's doing. Now, if I just anonymously didn't know the person and said some jackass, copyrighted a deck list, no, they shouldn't have done it. But now that I know the intention, I'm like, yeah, sure, do it, It's almost like, oh, you're like saying you're abusing the system because lack of knowledge and because you know that they'll probably make a mistake. Okay, that's almost like criminally bad. That's like an abuse of the court system, and like, yeah, that's I don't think he's going to get in trouble. They're the ones who made the mistake. But, spoiler alert, what's my opinion and conclusion finally on this? Yeah, I think they made a mistake and they shouldn't have allowed this. But do I absolutely feel like if I just kind of gut check at that, oh, it's a creation and there's like, 10 trillion different combination decks you can make, and this is a very unique creation with it, yeah, it probably does merit a creative work. I can see why they approved it, but do I think that in larger context and for the public good, which is what copyrights are for, at like a higher generic level, should they have approved this? Absolutely not. Because the whole point of the product is to make, decks, and would like the standard constructed format, for example, which this is not in, but just as an example, would you naturally expect collisions when people independently come up with the same thing? Yes. Well, that could be used as like an invalidation for the copyright of this deck, saying, hey, if you expect 10 different comedians to come up with a joke about airline food being bad, and you can reasonably, somewhat provably assume or prove, either one, that they didn't copy each other, well, then the joke is too generic and the joke can't be copyrighted. And there has been a lot of court cases supporting that. So if you step back and say, would people naturally be pushed to building a unicorn tribal deck mostly the same way with about the same point, but none of them are copying each other because the raw materials are not just generic bricks and you can make literally anything about it. The cards and what's written on them and how they work in the game structure steers you towards collisions of deck lists. Well, then this shouldn't have been granted in the first place. And I think that's the weakness that he's trying to point out, is that it's a lack of knowledge on the judges and lawyers' parts who approved this about how the game works and what the cards are. The cards are not generic faceless bricks where I could build a statue of Abraham Lincoln out of them, and nobody who made the bricks thought I could ever do that. Never conceived of it in a million years. Now, just looking at the individual cards and how they work, would somebody build an Angels and Demons black-white deck? Yes, absolutely. A lot of people would be steered towards that. That's just two simplistic tribals. I mean, the perfect example that I'm going to leave the video off on is if I took the cards and instead of playing the game with them, I built like a little, medieval castle out of the physical cards, taped them together, and then said, hey, look what I built. Could I copyright that design of a castle made out of playing cards? Absolutely, I could. That's kind of like if I built something out of poker cards, like standard playing cards, like the Eiffel Tower, that's... Let's not get into that. I built a generic Tyrannosaurus Rex. Did the makers of the cards ever think that that's what I would do with their product? No. If I tried to copyright a poker hand, like aces and eights, the dead man's hand, and I'm like, I'm going to copyright the dead man's hand. Could the makers of the game conceivably think that multiple people would come up with 2 aces and 2 eights? I forgot what the kicker allegedly was, but it's a legend. It's probably not true anyway. Yes, you would expect that in a normal game, people would put that together. People would, in draw poker, attempt to assemble that. It's generic enough that multiple people might build it. But if a judge knew absolutely nothing about poker, they might say, aces and eights, that's an assembly. Yeah, he put together these and that's a new creation. No, people would be steered to that. The whole point of the game, at least in the context of poker, is to do something like that. It already has an overriding category called two pair. So you're already really not creating anything. So it's like, creatures and like removal cards and demons in 2-color. Yeah, I really think it's actually more generic than you might think in the context of the Magic deck that he copyrighted. So surface level feeling, do I feel like the person made a creative work? Yes, but do I think there's enough exemptions to throw it out when all evidence is considered and the nature of the game and what the cards do and how they work and how the different pieces form patterns that were already made by Wizards of the Coast, where people might follow those patterns and come to the same conclusion over and over and over independently of each other? That should overwhelmingly invalidate this copyright, and it never should have been granted. That is my final conclusion as an expert certified copyright lawyer. Just kidding, I'm not. None of this is legal advice, by the way. Go talk to a lawyer if you want to involve anything involving copyright or this story or anything I mentioned in this video. So, in conclusion, every comment that you hear on these news articles and everybody talking about it on social media are all wrong. I am correct. Just kidding. But I am very confident that the conclusion I came to is initially it seems like one thing, but if you take all things into consideration, like a good court would, no, this shouldn't have been granted and it should be thrown out. One last thing I want to talk about. Should Wizards of the Coast get involved in this? Almost regardless of what they do, it's going to show poorly on them. It would be them going after a little guy. It would be the Lego maker going after somebody who built a castle out of Legos. It would be a bad look. So strategically, PR-wise, do I think they should go after them? No. Would they have a legal right to go after them? I have absolutely legitimately, sincerely no idea. So with the whole, would customers be steered into building a deck that's similar to this, so it's generic enough that people might independently all come up with it, making it too generic of a thing, too wide of a thing to be copyrighted? So is it Wizards' responsibility, or is it even their right in any way, shape, or form to go get this invalidated? I'd say it's in their best interest, but is it were they injured? Are they an injured party by this copyright being granted or existing? Directly, I'd say no, because they just sell the cards. They are very, very distant from singles, and they're very distant from anything people do with their cards. But also at the same time, what if this becomes a pattern? So I think they should spend time and money going to get this invalidated. Because once they do it once, then they have the court precedent, they call it, where you can look back at this case and say, this was thrown out because they came in, gave this reasoning, the judge said, oh yeah, you're right, and then they ripped up the patent and eliminated it. Then anybody in the future tries to copyright a deck list, you can just instantly go back to this, cite it as precedent, in and out of court in one day, and, gone. When that is the legal right thing to do, in my opinion, is to invalidate every one of these, because the game's rules and the deck building strategies and the way you build stuff will keep resulting in the same deck lists over and over and over. The only thing that I think would pass, what I'm saying is my final word here, is some kind of like, I put it together because I liked the art. It's a 60 card deck, but it's like, it contains no lands, and it's just like any art that was a painting. And the point of the deck list is like an assembly of the artworks, and like that deck list and that arrangement, it's not even a playable deck. Like, you could bring it to a tournament. You could build it on Arena and then go into a game with it. It's a legally playable deck in multiple formats, but it doesn't function or play as a deck because you didn't put any lands in, because your assembly of the 60 cards, your creative composition was multiple people's artwork, and you put together a deck of all spells that start with the word W or like have the word the in them or something, and like that's your artistic piece in your assembly that you made because nobody else would have thought to do that. That is the key. Nobody else would have thought to do that. While you have technically made a deck for the sake of making a deck, and it's, modern or eternal legal, okay, but it's not playable, nobody but you would have ever conceivably put that together. That's when I think you probably could get a copyright on it. But this guy copyrighted it, the fact that it's a playable competitive deck. So if you're like, no, I made an assembly based on wording, art, color, like my 60 cards, when you spread them out, they make an exact perfect, like average artwork color, like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And like, that's the presentation, that's the assembly, is like you made an art piece out of them, but it's also a playable deck for the sake of making a playable deck, and that's part of the art piece that you made with them containing it. Yeah, you should get a copyright on your art that you made on your deck list. Because nobody else in the world would have ever possibly conceived or reasonably been expected to conceive of that assembly of it for the reason that you did it, because that's not the reason intended or like brought out by the makers of the game. Wizards themselves would have never thought somebody would do that. Now, a competitive deck with a good CMC curve that you are going to win games with, as soon as it's qualified under that, no, you should never have been granted a copyright, because that's what the game's rules steer you towards. So anybody would have, should have, could have built that deck, and that's why, there's something else steering people towards it to the point where, no, he shouldn't have gotten it. So I think you guys get the point at this point. So can a deck list be copyrighted for a reason other than the playability of it? Yes, but as soon as playability is the point, that's the determining line, in my opinion. So you can see why this video took multiple days to make. I had to research stuff. I had to, back up and look up court precedent and all that. I pretty much prepared for this like it was a damn lawsuit. So please leave a like on the video and subscribe if you want more in-depth coverage of cool stuff that I know about. Actually, this channel is mostly just dumb memes and shit and live streams and gameplay and like news. If you want what I just said, you might want to go to my other channel, Emergency Survival Tips. Now that's in-depth studies into stuff that I know about that's educational that you can learn from. This video, bit of a unicorn on my channel. Although I do occasionally cover deck building, probability, and math, and stuff that I really, really know about. And then sometimes I just make a YouTube poop remix memeing on Mark Rosewater, which is also art, but it's not how I just described my content. But hey, especially leave a like if you appreciate that I went further than other YouTubers who were just like, is it a recipe? I don't know. Kinda yes, kinda no. Bye. Something this controversial, it's a 40-minute video. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time.